Hi, everyone. I'm Don Rooney.
And I'm John Timpane.
Welcome to the musical Innertube, the podcast born out of a mistake.
We once meant to introduce a soothing musical interlude, but we said soothing musical Innertube, and the name stuck.
On this podcast, we talk to interesting people about their interesting lives, jobs, hobbies, and passions.
Difference makers who really make a difference.
Well, folks, we are really happy today because we have Mr. Nick Roman back once again. Now, I could say a lot of things about Nick. I could say that he worked for public radio for many years in Southern California, that he's been a teacher, that he's been a fine broadcaster, but really what he's been is a great pal. So we're going to talk about Willie Mays today, and we should talk about it. Willie Mays was one of the greatest ball players. Many people feel the single greatest all-around ball player, maybe of all time. And we don't want to let that go without commenting on a great life in sports and an American life that bears looking at as well. So Nick Roman, welcome. And I'm wondering, tell us about any memories you may have of Willie Mays to get started.
I have three in particular. I mean, the overarching one is one, the wisdom of kids who play street ball and, we all knew Willie Mays was the greatest player in the history of baseball. I mean, I was 10 and I knew that. It was pretty easy to come to that conclusion. But my three great memories of that, and I'll start with the last one. I have a very clear memory because I did this on purpose. Of Willie Mays hitting a home run at Candlestick Park. It was in '72, and it came a few weeks after Mays had been traded from the Giants to the Mets, and the Mets were coming back to San Francisco to play for the first time since that trade. And I happened to be up in the Bay Area. My sister had gone to UC Berkeley and lived in the area. And so I decided to go over to Candlestick. I'd never been there before to see this ball game. The Giants were a pretty lousy team that year, and they had already made this trade. They had traded Mays, which was a shock, but not a shock. He was not the ball player that he had been. But I wanted to see the spectacle and see who came out. And I wanted to, say that I saw Willie Mays' first game back in San Francisco since the trade. So he came up in the first inning and got a nice round of applause from a small crowd. About 18,000 were there that night. And he grounded out. And then he came up again later on and hit a fly ball and he was out. And then the third time he came up, I remember there were runners on base. And he hit a shot that went in over the left field fence that, to my eye, disappeared into the night. And as far as I know, is still flying. It went into orbit. I had never seen a home run hit that hard, that far in my life. And that's still the case today, at least that I've seen in person. And it was amazing. The place went crazy, even though it was, Giants home game. I remember Chris Spire, who was playing shortstop for the Giants at the time. When Mays hit that ball, Spire was in a crouch and came up as if I might be able to snag this. No, it just vanished. It was amazing, and I was lucky enough to see a number of the great home run hitters hit home runs in person when I was there.
Yeah.
But that's the one that I really, really remember most of all. The other memory is that my dad came home some years earlier and gave me a baseball bat that he said had been given to him by a fella that he had worked with who had been at spring training. And Mays apparently had, as the story goes, that I was told, that Mays had used that bat in spring training and chipped it. So there's a little chip around the barrel, but, was my dad making up the story? All I know is it said 24 on the handle, and I have since looked it up, and I found out what kind of bat Mays used during his career. It is that bat. It's a Louisville Slugger, certain model, certain size, certain length, and I've had it ever since. It's sitting behind me here. I just keep it around just to remember, the great Willie Mays. And then my last memory, which is actually my first one, was, and this goes back to the wisdom of little kids. I was a baseball card collector, still am when I can find them. And I always, one of the kids in my neighborhood said, "Hey, the baseball cards are available. They've got them now in stock down at the liquor store." This is back in the days when there were such things as liquor stores, and little kids used to go to liquor stores.
Little kids could go in without getting...
Yeah, without getting hassled or anything like that. And this was the only place that had them. They had baseball cards, and we were down there like every day, seeing if they would get a pack or something.
Yeah.
So we all went down and bought our first pack of the season, and I popped mine open, and there the first card on top was Willie Mays. And I turned to my friends and I said, "I'm done. I'm done. I don't need to get any more cards this year. I'm done.
Wow.
I got the top card." And I have since been able to acquire, 3 or 4 other Willie Mays baseball cards that I keep in a catalog somewhere in this office. But there's just amazing memories of everything that Willie Mays was, the way he played, the kind of person he was. And it was very sad when we lost him.
It seems to me that these days we have, I don't know if they used to call players like him 5-tool players back then, but certainly he was a 5-tool player. He was a canny base runner, a very good base stealer. He played perhaps the best center field of all time. He had a very canny system of working with the pitcher about where to pitch people in the count. He actually signaling from center, and he would position himself in anticipation of what the batter would do if the batter was lucky enough to connect. Now, I've never heard of that. I've never heard of a center fielder running the game like that. Usually, for our listeners, it's much more common that that the catcher calls the game, and the catcher is getting signals from the bench, from the manager saying, "Throw this one now, throw this one now," and the catcher relays that to the pitcher. But in fact, there was this whole other layer. It really went catcher, pitcher, Willie Mays. and then he would position himself to catch the ball. And if the player hit the ball where Willie Mays wasn't and he couldn't catch it, later he would berate the pitcher. "You did not pitch the right pitch." That's why I couldn't get to that ball. So it's, I don't know, we could go, we don't want to get also technical, but here's an insight into a player of very uncanny awareness and simply being able to strategize like that down to the pitch. Unbelievable.
No, I mean, he understood the game. He understood how to teach the game to others, which is a rare quality among star players, because sometimes they're so good, they don't even know how it is that they just sort of think, "Well, I can do this. Why can't you?" He was obviously a good teammate, was basically the man on the Giants, and brought with him great success and great respect from everybody that played in the game. I mean, you look at how many All-Star games he was in from the beginning to the end. He was always in the All-Star game.
Of course he was.
You just sort of took that for granted. First ballot Hall of Fame. He wasn't unanimous, which is like maddening, because obviously there are some baseball writers back in those days who were just fools. But there were some that didn't vote for Henry Aaron either, and it makes no sense at all. But
Nope.
he was great. And after his career was over, stayed in San Francisco and was routinely seen at the at whether it was Candlestick, and then later on, whatever they're calling the ballpark this week, Giant Stadium in San Francisco. He was there all the time, always wearing a Giants cap, always talking to the young players, on the Giants, and helping them through, what it was that he did. And, you just look at his stats. It's just amazing. how many times he led the league in whatever it was. I
Right.
mean, he led the league in stolen bases. He led the
Right.
league late in his last full season with the Giants. He led for the first time in his career. He led the National League in walks, which was crazy because Willie McCovey was sitting behind him. So,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
you want to do that? I guess that makes sense. Yeah, fabulous ball player.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to get past Mays to get to McCovey.
Yeah,
Most of frankly, what I remember of Willie Mays is obviously the over-the-shoulder catch in the World Series. That's the one that everybody knows about. But one of the things that intrigued me, and I did a little digging into it, I didn't really find a lot of. I'm sure there's a lot written on this that I just missed somehow that I didn't. I did a cursory search, if you will, and I didn't get into the depth of it. But it did seem like he wanted to coach or be involved in coaching after he stopped playing, and he never got the opportunity to do that. And that always amazed me because, as you said earlier, every team that he played on, well, it was the Giants and the Mets. Did he play on any other? I don't think he played on any other team.
no, he played a handful of ball games in the Negro Leagues, but that's it.
Right. Yeah. But every team he played on, the other players that he was with benefited from his knowledge, and he was happy to share it and happy to act as a de facto coach. But when it came time to actually hire him on the staff of either the Giants or the Mets or any other team, that didn't happen. And I don't know if Nick, you or John have any insight into that. I was kind of unsuccessful in finding out why that didn't happen.
I don't know, what may have been going on back then. I mean, obviously he was a presence around the Giants during spring training and during the regular season. Maybe he preferred a de facto, coaching position rather than actually be on the coaching staff. But he was certainly a presence with the Giants for the entire rest of his life.
It seems that since we're talking about his presence with the Giants, I do want to, think about, highlights in his career. I mean, it is sort of a highlight film. You can look at the old films of him making great catches against Vic Wertz. There's one where I think the one that I keep remembering is it's at Candlestick. They have that god awful chicken wire
Chain link fence. Yep.
Yeah, and
it was
he goes up
19.
with-
It was 19. I believe it was 1970 or 71. I'm not sure of the year, but yeah, Bobby Bonds, Barry's dad, was playing right field. I know the one you're talking about.
Yes.
It was that catch. You can catch it. You can do it on YouTube because I've seen it a zillion times. And you just put in Mays catch Candlestick Bobby Bonds, and it's going to show you. Somebody hit a shot to right field, and like John was saying, they had, this is so crazy, a chain link fence as the outfield fence. Not like you couldn't get your spikes caught up in that thing and tear a leg up, which is the kind of stuff that could happen. Mays is, I think at the time he's 38 or 39 years old. Bobby Bonds goes back and he looks like he's got the ball. He's going to catch it up against the fence, and Mays comes flying into the picture and, sort of soars past Bonds and one-hands it and smashes into the fence and somehow comes up unharmed. It is amazing. I mean, to me, that catch is greater than the one in the World Series one, obviously, against the Cleveland Indians and
Unbelievable.
in 54 at Polo Grounds in New York is amazing because that weirdly shaped stadium, he's running forever and a day. I mean, he's practically running out of the burrow to get the ball, and then turns it into a double play, which was the other thing that was amazing about it.
The throw is just about as great as the catch, as they often say, So he goes to San Francisco with the team, and this is something that happened. The Dodgers moved west and the Giants moved west. After a 1950s in which a New York team almost always won the World Series, usually the Yankees, but the Dodgers finally broke through in 55, and Mays' own team won in 54. So he goes out to the West Coast, and you can't really say he was welcomed with open arms by San Francisco. I don't mean the fans, I mean the city. There was something about him and that city. I realized he made it his home afterwards, but race was involved. What have you heard about that? Because he should have been welcomed with adulation where he was, as he was everywhere else, but somehow it's a little cool in San Francisco.
At the time, I mean, people think of San Francisco as this sort of, liberal bastion today. It was certainly, even back in those days, full of free thinkers, and you had, all the rock music that started there, in the 60s, and then the comedians and the Hungry Eye and all that kind of stuff going on there.
Yes.
Carol Doda at the strip club, and,
Carol,
a lot of things.
Doda.
Yeah. So a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
But there were parts of the city that were, pretty, snooty and not especially welcoming to even the most famous black ball player in America. And he had trouble buying a particular house that he had wanted up on a hill and in a neighborhood in San Francisco, and there was some opposition to it. I know that there is a documentary that has been on MLB Network, and I think it's been, you can find it, that sort of recounts all of that, because it required the mayor to sort of step in and say, what's going on here? But it was true, at least. And I think also the people in San Francisco didn't embrace him in the same way that they later embraced other ball players who followed. Orlando Cepeda, in particular.
He felt overshadowed by Orlando Cepeda, as a matter of fact, in terms of,
right. Cepeda had, Mays was not he was outgoing amongst his teammates, but not really sort of like, flamboyant, but he's a spectacular player, obviously. But Cepeda had a big personality that sort of, grabbed the room. And then the following season, Willie McCovey comes up, and he's just, fabulous from the midseason on for the Giants. So, I don't want to say that Mays was really, not taken for granted, but it was almost as if he's an established star and let's look at the next new thing. It was different in Los Angeles for Koufax and Drysdale because they were not big stars, superstars, until they came to Los Angeles, and then Koufax just blossomed into this great star, and the same with Drysdale. It was sort of like, well, yeah, Willie Mays, yeah, he's great, but look at this kid, So there were, there was a different sort of appreciation for Cepeda and for McCovey than there was for Mays. It's just too bad because, in this, he was unreal great.
I think people ought to watch, also talking about things they ought to find on television. Obviously, the MLB channel has a lot of great stuff on Mays, and this year have really, to their credit, ever since Mays passed away, they've been running a lot of documentaries about him. There's a 2010 interview that they're running this week as we speak with Willie Mays, done by Bob Costas on a show called Studio 24. If you want to see the real Mays, whenever you ask him a question about what was happening on this date or how did that play happen, you see the real Mays. Because first of all, here's a guy, 79, and he has detailed memory. He knows where everybody was on the field. He has he has such an amazing, penetrating, strategic mind. He talks about, well, we were going to do it this way to make sure that they couldn't do that. And this is what baseball is about, is the invisible strategy. And he was a master of it. And I am, he was talking about how, yeah, Bob, Bob Gibson knocked him down all the time with pitches, but he wasn't scared of him. he said, Bob Gibson and Koufax were the two best pitchers I ever faced, which one would expect him to say. He says, but the only one I was really afraid of was Dick Raditz.
Yeah.
So, I mean, here's a man who has this incredible, detailed, granular memory. All these years later, he played his last game almost 40 years ago. And
41.
41 years
73.
ago. Yeah. And amazing. And that's how he played too. I mean, we think about the things that he could do physically. And of course, the record is there, the wonderful steals, the amazing home runs, the 4 home runs in Milwaukee, and his joy at, winning the 1954 World Series. And also I think he was on base when Bobby Thompson hit the shot heard while in the world in 51. And you see this young kid just leaping for joy, clapping his hands in midair, dancing around, not knowing what and those are the days in which you did not do those things. Those were days in which you didn't show people up. You could show joy, but it had to be within limits. And of course, Mays didn't come from there. He came from somewhere else where you did show pleasure in what you did and what your team did. But you see it really as even at 79, he had quick responses. He set the scene. He showed what he was trying to do. He explained what his system was. That's Willie Mays too.
After that 54 World Series, he played in 4 World Series, 51 and 54 with the Giants in New York, and then 62 with the Giants in San Francisco. And then his last shot was 73 with the Mets, a team that got into the World Series and really nobody really expected to be able to be there. And he was sort of denied greatness or denied victories in those 2 World Series. First, because just, bad luck. 62, the deciding game was 1-0,
Yeah, right.
He hits a double in the bottom of the 9th inning with Matty Alou at first base. Alou has to stop at third. He can't score the tying run, and Mays is at second, and then McCovey comes up right after it, hits a line drive just a little bit to the side of Bobby Richardson, second baseman. He grabs it, and the series is over. It was kind of a swampy outfield. It helped Roger Maris make a relay throw to keep, Matty Alou from scoring, and a lot of things go on that just didn't work out in his favor. And then in 73, the deciding game is in Oakland, and the Mets had opportunities at other games in that series to win it. Mays is remembered. People say, well, he was stumbling around in the outfield in Oakland. That outfield in Oakland, chopped up by the Raiders playing in that stadium.
Oh, yeah.
It was just awful. I mean, he was lucky to even get through that swamp and get to a baseball. But, so if you don't get those kind of opportunities, if you have, there's the Dodgers taking World Series from the Giants, keeping them out of the World Series, the St. Louis Cardinals doing the same then in other seasons, and the Giants not able to develop players to counter all of that. That's what happens.
What about the situation of the trade that finally happens in San Francisco, where they send him off, and they send him off to the Mets? Basically, they send him home.
Yeah.
Was that intentional?
Yeah, it was. The Giants had won the division title in 71. The year before, they had, a couple of young outfielders, Bobby Bonds, and then another kid on the other side, Ken Anderson. They were very good. They had some rookies coming up. Gary Matthews was on his way up, and Gary Maddox was coming up. And Mays was at the tail end of his career, and everybody knew it. I mean, and the Mets were terrible. The Mets needed a little bit of a extra spark. If you look at the stats for Mays in that 72 season after he comes back to New York. There's a stretch in there. You can do it on Baseball Reference because they've got all the game logs. There's a stretch in there where he's the best hitter on the Mets for a good 2 months.
Yes.
At his age, and it even at his sort of diminished skill level, he's still the best player on that Mets team. And then that 73 team, he didn't play so well, but that team caught fire, and he certainly was in the lineup as they went down the stretch and as they made the World Series. So yeah, it was kind of a thank you, a goodbye tour. Kind of the Braves did it years later, trading Henry Aaron back to Milwaukee to play with the Brewers. He got a chance to tour all the American League towns too, so that was sort of a nice thing.
And I guess the Angels did it with Pujols. They sent him back to St. Louis for his.
They did
last couple of years.
Actually, the Angels cut him.
Oh, okay.
They cut him, and he ended up with the Dodgers, and it worked out well for the Dodgers. As he was the Dodgers that season. It's crazy to say it. Pujols was the Dodgers' best hitter against left-hand pitching that season.
Unbelievable.
He wasn't so good at, it was tough against righties, but the Dodgers were able to platoon correctly, and when they got him in against left-hand pitchers, boy, he just tore them up. Then the next season with the Cardinals, same deal. The Cardinals were able to do the same thing, and it helps. By that time, the designated hitter was in, and that helped a lot too. So. Had DH been around back in those days, maybe Mays gets more rest. Maybe he doesn't have to go running out to center field and smashing into fences and chasing down fly balls that are hit 1.5 miles. But that wasn't how the game was played, and it probably wasn't the way he wanted to play the game either. I mean, today, I was thinking about this. Today, he was so good that today you might make him the shortstop, as opposed to having him out in center field.
Right.
John, you were talking about how could he control a game from center field. Boy, he could really have done it if he was playing shortstop.
Yep.
So, I'm just glad, and we all should be glad that we were able to see him play.
When he retires, he has the second most home runs in history, behind only Babe Ruth. He's only 54 behind, and we have to note here that he missed the most of 2 seasons right at the beginning of his career, serving in the military. And I think there are very few people who doubt that, given the way he played right at the beginning of his career, that he would have been the greatest home run hitter of all time. It's today. I think the home run title has sort of been pooped on a little bit. It's if not, I don't know, is that a technical term? That it doesn't mean the same thing anymore. But
and those exact words too, pooped on. Yeah.
Yes, pooped on. But do you feel that, Nick, that in some ways we're talking about a guy who probably was the best player in history. We've just been talking about how he didn't get he got into 4 World Series over 23 years. That's not a lot, and you went 1 for 4, which is, some people never win one, but still it's surprising, especially with the teams he played on. There's sort of a luck factor there also. But, do you feel the same thing about the home run title? He might well have had that.
Yeah. Well, and that was the thinking. I mean, when he got to 500, thinking you're sort of counting on your fingers, like, can he stick around long enough? Is he good enough? But he had exhausted himself to such a great degree with the way that he played. It was a sort of reckless. There was one season where he had to get checked into the hospital for exhaustion because he was so tired, putting so much effort into what he was doing. His good fortune was that he was never, to the best of my knowledge, he was never seriously hurt. In the kind of thing that would sideline you for 2 months. He missed that time. Well, you're right. When he missed the time in the military, That was the entire 52 season and then a good portion of 53 before he came back. When he comes back and he plays a full season in 54, he hits 54 home runs. It's like, that's pretty good. So you figure, so what might he have been able to hit in that season and a half or season and 3/4 that he missed? 45, maybe 50, all the 60. I don't know.
And it's also we were talking about Fernando last week, and how they didn't have a limit on his innings or his pitches. They just threw him out, and he did 150 pitches a game in order to win. Mays played during that time in baseball when you just went out and played, and you played and you played and you played, and then you went home and got some sleep, and then went out and played again the next day. And there weren't trainers to the extent that there are now, and there weren't nutritionists, and you didn't have all that stuff behind you. You went out and played ball.
Yeah. He missed very, very few games I'm looking at it now, from 54 until 66. He never misses more than 11 games in a season.
That's unbelievable.
That's the most that he ever missed.
Was that a 154 game season?
Well, part of it was, and then part of it was 162 games. So he's not missing very many games at all. And of course, he's playing an all-star game too. Right. He's playing in all the spring training games.
And in a few World Series games afterwards.
Yeah. So it's, and he's exhausting himself. He's batting third for the Giants. So he's up, more than just about everybody else on the ball club. He's expected to do more than any other team player on the team. He expects it of himself too. It's a workload that really few players today can match and stay healthy. That's we're here in Southern California, and you're in the Philadelphia area. Bryce Harper, tremendous ball player, and he's had to endure a couple of terrible injuries.
Yes.
Mike Trout hasn't played a full season in I don't know how long. It's a really tough game, and to endure like that is remarkable.
This is a 23-year career. That is a long time in sports. He was not the same player in the last 8 years. It could be argued that he, like people like Mantle, played a little tiny bit too long. But as you say, at the end of his career, he was playing in World Series, and so there's that. But we should point out that over that 23 years, he averages over 300, just barely 301, but still over 23 years. I mean, it's crazy. He steals bases at a higher clip than like 75%. So, he 3 out of 4 he steals, which is really amazing for a whole career like that. There is, to explain this to our audience, there's something called WAR, and it's a much discussed statistic, but it's a way of measuring how valuable a player is, saying, well, if you take his statistics and you put them against an average player, how many more games did his team win because he was on the team? Well, Mays led the major leagues in wins against replacement 10 out of his 23 years. That's the first thing, which is just ridiculous. And secondly, I think he ends up with about 156 games won against replacement, which means he helped his team win an entire season. That's a way of realizing just how much he meant to teams that often were not quite up to his level. And he still played his heart out, as you were saying.
I'm looking at the wins above replacement stat for his last full season in San Francisco, which was 1971. He's 40 years old. Wins above replacement that season is 6.1. He's 5th in the National League at age 40. He's
right.
The only guys that beat him are Joe Torre, who is the MVP, Henry Aaron and Willie Stargell, who were fellow Hall of Famers, and Dick Allen, who was playing for the Dodgers. That's it. He's ahead of everybody else on his team. He's ahead of, Joe Morgan. He's ahead of Lou Brock. 6'1", is all-star level. Well, and of course, he was an all-star anyway that season, so there you go. At age 40. At age 40, that's what he's doing.
It's so hard to imagine. Just so hard to imagine. To think that Mays never got badly hurt in his 23 years, given the way he played, his baseball cap flying off his head, rounding second. I mean, this is the way we think of him. And to think that he didn't get hurt very much is amazing, because you mentioned Bryce Harper, who plays with the same abandon. He gets hurt all the time.
Yeah.
Well, plus the other thing is
Mike Trout too.
Yeah,
Yes,
Mike Trout
yes.
too. Plus the other thing is what we mentioned earlier is that Bryce Harper was an outfielder. Now that he's getting in his 30s, which is old for a ball player, they're moving him over to first base. They did that a lot with players who played athletic positions like the outfield. As they, got into their older years, they were moved to a more staid position like first base, where there's still some athletic ability necessary, but not the flying down the side of the road sort. And Mays never took that.
Yeah, I'm looking at he did during his career end up playing 84 games at first base. I know that they tried moving him in, for a little bit in I got to find the stat here because I remember when it happened. In 67, 68, they decided, hey, play a little bit of first base. It might take some of the stress and strain off of you. But it didn't take, he still was, now I'm going back to the outfield. So 84 games in what, 23 years? Yeah.
It's got to be difficult to tell Willie Mays, I think we'll take you out of the outfield and put you in first base. It's got to be hard to do that.
Well, and also when you're still even, throughout your entire career, you're the best outfielder in baseball.
Yes.
Might as well just leave him there.
Yeah. And really, to step back a ways, it's difficult to look Willie Mays in the face and say, hey, slow down, buddy. Don't play hard.
No, yeah.
Yes.
That seems an oxymoron in itself right there.
Yeah. No, it was just, it was innate in him. It was the kind of baseball he wanted to play. It's what he knew how to do. It's what he knew his team needed. And it's what he delivered. And, fans who got a chance to see him on a regular basis or see him in person, what a treat. What a treat. It's memories that you never forget. I still remember that home run. It's still, I got to, talk to NASA. It's probably tracking that ball still somewhere out there.
And I think we have to also credit him, along with Jackie Robinson and many other players who had played in the Negro Leagues and then came across in the first tranche of players to the major leagues. I think we need to credit Willie with bringing a new style, a new way of just going about your business on the field. It is flamboyant. It doesn't rub. It's not aggressive in the sense of making the other team feel bad necessarily. It's just he plays with sprezzatura, with pizzazz, with sparkle, and his way of wheeling and throwing that whirl and whip, which people hadn't seen before. His method of taking an extra base on a slow single to the outfield. These kinds of things really sort of revolutionized the way baseball was played, because it had gotten into a very four-square kind of place. I'm not saying the players weren't great. Of course they were. But Mays just brought a new infusion of a different kind of energy.
Yeah, the basket catch in particular.
Mm-hmm.
He did it. Very few others have even attempted it. But it was what he knew how to do and could pull it off. And he had his reasons for doing it that way. He's always said the basket catch let him get the ball out of his glove and back to the infield to where it was supposed to be a lot faster. And the proof was he was the best outfielder in baseball. So, I was looking this up. When you look at the number of players that have hit 500 home runs, which is sort of like the benchmark for absolute greatness in baseball, right?
Sure.
Mays comes up in 51. he's one of 8 ball players who come up in the 50s who end up hitting 500 home runs. It's the one decade
Amazing.
that turns out more 500 home run hitters than any other. And you're right, John, because those ball players changed the way the game is played. So you look at the way a game is being played in, say, the early 50s versus how it's played in the middle 60s. It's a completely different ball game.
Yes.
It's faster. It's flashier. There's a lot more going on. Credit to those ball players, which would be, Mantle, Mays, Aaron, Ernie Banks, Eddie Matthews, Frank Robinson, McCovey, and I'm blanking on the last one. Oh, Harmon Killebrew is the other one who comes up in the 50s, and they all hit 500 home runs, and they're all in the Hall of Fame, and they're all the greatest players that I ever saw. Just all of them.
Yeah. At a time when pitchers were increasingly getting the upper hand, where in the rest of the league, batting averages are going down. You see these that class.
Yeah,
maybe there will never be another one quite like that. That is an amazing statistic. The one I'm looking at while you were looking at that one, I was looking at his outfield production. He led the league in assists 5 times. He was in double figures all the time with assists. But here's the thing, I think, is he led the league in double plays from the outfield. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. In other words, he was just throwing people out at first and second base all the time. I mean, that's an astonishing. It's not only is it a high number, but it's consistent. I'm looking at it.
It makes you wonder, what were those base runners thinking?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Do you take that long a lead off of first when they hit it to Willie Mays? I don't think so.
What are you doing?
I just don't think so.
Something else
Here's
too,
an idea.
and we're talking about the evolution of hitters. Like everybody else, I've seen old movies of players in the 30s and 40s. But when you look at hitters in the 30s and 40s, it looks like they're slapping at the ball. It doesn't look like there's a swing. And when you get into hitters like Ted Williams, like Mays and Harmon Killebrew and Mickey Mantle, you start to see the evolution of a swing. They're making a decided, intentional sort of swing where they're looking at where the ball is coming from and figuring out how to meet it with their bat to get the most impact out of it. And it does talk. We're talking about the evolution of baseball. I think that class was the first one where they were kind of looking for the ball and trying to figure out how to work the bat to get that hit.
And of course, I looked this up on the home run log. I mean, it's not like Mays was hitting off the last guy out of the bullpen. He hit his first home run is against Warren Spahn, the great left-hand pitcher. He hits 18 in his career against Warren Spahn. He hits 13 against Drysdale. That's 31 home runs against 2 Hall of Famers. And that doesn't count all the home runs he hit against, Robin Roberts or Sandy Koufax or Bob Gibson or Ferguson Jenkins. And the only guy who kind of escaped him was Tom Seaver. But anyone else who was a Hall of Famer and who was pitching back in those days, he got him.
Yeah, and he knew how many he hit off of each pitcher. In that interview I mentioned earlier, he talks about, well, I only hit 80 off of Gibson, but you got to understand, I hit 13 off of Don Drysdale, and he drilled me every time I was up there.
Yeah. That's my other clear memory of Willie Mays is picking himself up out of the dust after Drysdale, knocked him down. So,
well, Nick, once again, such a pleasure to have you with us. You know so much and you felt so much, and it's obvious that you love this player and this game. And so we want to just say Happy New Year. It's coming up. Merry Christmas. Thank you for being with us for this year, and thank you for letting us meditate on the greatest baseball player who ever lived.
Well, spring training's not far away.
pitchers and catchers report.
I'm looking forward to it.
All I want for Christmas is spring training, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. We'll bet, it'll be pitchers and catches after a report within about 3 months from now. So I'm waiting.
And thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
Hey, let us know how we're doing. Send us an email at musicalinnertube, all one word, @gmail.com.
Do you know someone with a great story to tell? Let us know. Send us an email or log in to our website, musicalinnertube.com, and click on the microphone in the lower right-hand corner to leave us a voicemail.
And while you're on our website, take a few minutes to listen to past episodes of the podcast. They're all there, along with pictures and biographies of our guests, blog posts, and lots more.
And as always, our thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for providing us with our theme music.